Good morning, afternoon, or evening, cats and dogs. We're back for the second video from the 2.4 and 2.5 guided notes. This is going to include problems 35 through the last question in the guided notes, which is, I believe, number 44. So we'll go through these. That way it reinforces the information you would have seen yesterday or in your previous video. So number 35, we're going to evaluate these expressions as well. We've got negative 35 divided by b if b equals negative 5. It's really like the same problems you saw at the very end of our lesson here from the previous video where we were evaluating expressions, but each of these is giving you different values and different variables. So replace b with negative 5. They're actually a little easier than the ones up above. Negative 35 divided by negative 5, which of course gets us 7. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on these because we saw a lot of questions like this at the end of our last video, which these are a little bit higher level, more pre-algebra related. These might be for some of the students who are maybe struggling a bit more to get some additional practice. Number 36, we have x over 5. So we've got negative 5 over 5, and that's division. Remember that fraction bar. Negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. Good. Number 37, replace a with 5 and b with negative 5. So you're going to get, I'll just pull all this down, 250 over 5 times negative 5. Don't forget that multiplication between them. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, and 250 divided by negative 25 is negative 10. It's a lot of rules to remember in this unit, so it's understandable if you do have some struggles or some difficulties with this. Just make sure to go back to these notes, practice some of this stuff over and over and over again. And the more practice you get, the better off you'll be with remembering these rules. All right, so let's take a look at number 38. We do have some word problems mixed in. None of them are very challenging, not as much as the ones for adding and subtracting, which I do think were a little bit more difficult. So this problem says the Good Food and More grocery store loses an average of $210 a day due to breakage, shoplifting, and food expiration. Part A, write a multiplication sentence to represent the amount of money the store loses on average per 7-day week. So what we can do, we could write an addition sentence, but it asks for a multiplication sentence here. The loss of $210 a day can be represented with negative 210, and then multiply that by 7 since we're talking about a 7-day week. So for part B, when it asks how much money does the store lose on average per 7-day week, just take 210 times 7 and it will be a negative value. 200 times 7 is 1400 and 10 times 7 is 70. So you should get negative $1,470. So quite a bit of money, but it's also not surprising. A lot of grocery stores do lose money due to these unfortunate circumstances. I know there's been a couple of times I've dropped something and broken it. That's my own fault as well. Or one of my kids will do that if they come with me. All right. Let's take a look at numbers 39, 40, and 41, I think all go together. These are problems on finding the mean. You might think of it as the average, but this is something that we see in pre-algebra that we don't necessarily see in Math 7. So it's a little higher level. They'll talk about mean and average later, but I think it's good to mix this in right now. So 39 says, the wind chill temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit for the first 6 days of January were -2, 8, 5, -9, -12, and -2. Find the mean temperature for 6 days. Interpret the quotient. So let's first remember how we find the mean for a set of numbers. Well, to find the mean for a set of numbers, you want to find the sum of the numbers. Then divide that sum by the number of numbers in the set. So let's start by figuring out the sum of the numbers. So what I did was I put all the negative numbers together and all of the positive numbers together and then combine them. So we've got a -2, a -9, a -12, and a -2 to get -25. Now, if you're thinking there's 4 negatives, it should be positive. Remember, that's only for multiplying. So -2 plus -9 is -11. -11 plus -2 is -13. And -13 plus -12 is -25. So those will combine to give us 25. The two positives, 8 and 5, will get us 13. So let's combine -25 and 13 together to get -12. If you're hearing a noise in the background, I have no idea what toy my 2.5-year-old brought upstairs, but it's making really obnoxious sounds, which are probably driving my husband nuts right now, and my other son. All right, so now let's go ahead and find the mean in this case. We have a sum of negative 12. We added those up here. This was over a 6-day period, so take negative 12 divided by 6, and we also had 6 values. That'll get us negative 2. So what you notice here is we're combining both adding integers, positives and negatives, and multiplying and dividing, depending, but in this case, division of positives and negatives. So we're combining multiple skills together. So we get negative 2 degrees Fahrenheit. To interpret this, what we can say is that the mean temperature for 6 days will be negative 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically, again, take your question or what you're asked to do and rewrite it in the form of a sentence with your solution in there. All right, let's try another one of these. Linda has golf scores of negative 3, negative 2, 1, and 0 during 4 rounds of golf. Find the mean of her golf scores. All right, let's find the sum first. So negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5, plus 1 is negative 4, plus 0, of course, is still negative 4. This was over 4 rounds of golf, so take negative 4 divided by 4. That will get us an average score of negative 1. So to interpret this, we can say Linda's mean golf score is negative 1. All right, number 41. We've got one more of these. I am going to stress this one's a little higher level. I normally, when we do this in class, say you can use your calculators for this problem, because in reality, you wouldn't be calculating these more than likely by hand. So let's find the sum of these amounts. The architecture firm of Stewart and Maxwell had monthly profits of 1,200, 755, negative 450, 210, and negative 640 over 5 months. What was the average profit for those months? And interpret the quotient. So I added the positives together, and I did use my calculator as well to get 2,165. I added my negatives together to get negative 1,090. 2,165 plus negative 1,090 is 1,075. But we have to divide that by 5 since we're talking about a 5-month period. 1,075 divided by 5 is going to give us an average of 215. So what we can say is that the average profit was $215. We could say the average monthly profit was $215 to be a little bit more specific. Again, these mean problems, don't forget, find the average, add up all your values, we'll go back to these, and then divide by how many numbers there are. The one thing I want to point out is just make sure you read really carefully because you don't want to forget this negative 2 here. I frequently have students try this and they drop off the negative 2. Also, sometimes it might say, like in this case, during 4 rounds of golf, I'll have students try to add that in as one of the numbers, but it's not one of the scores, it's how many rounds we had or how many scores we had. All right, so 42, 43, I think are a little bit easier. The temperature dropped a total of 18 degrees Fahrenheit over 6 hours. What was the mean hourly temperature drop? Write an expression to represent this situation, evaluate it, and interpret the solution. So a drop of 18 degrees is going to be negative 18 divided by 6 for the 6 hours. We're not giving you the total, we're not giving you each individual temperature, but they're giving you the total drop, so the total amount over those 6 hours. So we actually have a little bit less work to do than in the previous questions. Negative 18 divided by 6 and it is an average of negative 3 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. So we can say the temperature dropped an average of 3 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. Again, your interpret the solution doesn't need to look identical to mine, but it should basically include your solution in the form of a sentence. All right, number 43. An airplane is approaching its destination and has begun its final descent into the airport. The plane descends at a rate of 300 feet per minute. Write a multiplication sentence to represent the change in altitude of the plane after 4 minutes. This is something that's always interesting to watch if you're on a plane that has, not that many people are flying in planes right now, but if you're on a plane that has a TV or a screen on the back of the seat in front of you, a lot of times you can scroll through and you can see what your elevation is, you can see where you're at in terms of your um, destination versus where you left. And again, it will show you, might even show you a graph, some of them do, of your elevation over time. So multiplication sentence in this case, since we're descending 300 feet per minute, will be negative 300 times the 4 minutes we're looking at. So negative 300 times 4. What is the change in altitude of the plane after 4 minutes? 300 times 4 is going to get us 1200, but this will be negative 1,200 feet. Make sure you don't write negative 1,200 feet per minute, since in this case, this is just the change in altitude over a 4-minute period, not the change in altitude over 1 minute. If you say per minute, you're talking descending 1,200 feet in 1 minute, which would be pretty quick and not good. All right, I have to skip through some of these slides here. Number 44 asks you to give an example of 4 integers whose product is negative. If these videos weren't so lengthy and you didn't have so much to do on your own, I might make this a discussion question. It's something we would discuss in class and have students share up at the board. But I want you to pause the video, think of an example of 4 integers that when you multiply them, the answer will be negative. All right, so you have a lot of different options for what you could write here. Basically, when you go to write your example out, you need to assure that you either have one negative integer out of the 4 or 3 of the integers need to be negative out of the 4. So I could write something like negative 5 times 3 times negative 2 times negative 8. And you didn't have to find the solution. Or I could have 5 times 3 times negative 2 times 8, where only one of the numbers is negative. So you're looking for either one number to be negative or for there to be 3 negative numbers. In that case, your solution will be negative. All right, at this point, you should have a practice quiz to do on multiplying and dividing integers. It's good to get some practice with that because even though it's not an extremely difficult concept, it's one that's easily forgotten if you don't practice it. Thanks for listening.